alien athletes adopted human victory celebrations because they express joy perfectly. Part 1. The stadium held 70,000 aliens, and every single one of them sat in perfect silence. This was normal for the Galactic Athletic Federation. It had been normal for 3,000 years. When an athlete won, they would lower their head or make a small gesture with whatever body parts they had. Sometimes they would release a specific scent. Sometimes they would change color for exactly 2 seconds, but they never made noise. They never moved too much. That would be uncivilized. Did not know this yet. She was too busy running. The human woman pushed her legs harder as she came around the final turn of the 3,000-meter race. Her lungs burned. Her muscles screamed. Beside her, a runner moved on 4 powerful legs, its fur slick with sweat. They had won this race for the past 5 years. Everyone expected it to win again. Leaned forward. She pushed every bit of energy she had left into her legs. The finish line came closer. 50 meters, 20 meters, 10 meters. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She could hear nothing else because the crowd made no sound at all. She crossed the line half a step ahead of them. For a moment just ran. Her body needed to slow down gradually. Then her brain caught up with what had happened. She had won. She had actually won. Against aliens who had been running these distances for thousands of years, she had won. Threw both arms straight up into the air. She opened her mouth and screamed, a wordless sound of pure joy that echoed across the silent stadium. Then her legs gave out and she dropped to her knees on the track, laughing and crying at the same time. She pressed her hands to her face. Her whole body shook with emotion. The stadium remained absolutely silent. Slowly became aware of this. She looked up, her vision blurry with tears, and saw thousands of aliens staring at her. None of them moved. None of them made a sound. Had she done something wrong? She wiped her eyes and slowly stood up. The runner approached her. Its name was, and it moved carefully as if might be dangerous. "Are you injured?" asked. The translator device made its voice sound like wind through bells. "What? No, I'm fine," said, still breathing hard. "I'm just happy I won." "Yes, you won." Tilted its head in what would learn was the traditional gesture of acknowledgement. "Why did you make that sound?" "Because I'm happy," repeated. She laughed again. She couldn't help it. "Don't you celebrate when you win?" "I acknowledged the result," said. It sounded confused. "I released the scent of satisfaction. Did you not detect it?" Blinked. She had no idea what to say to that. In the diplomatic box high above the track, Ambassador of the Confederacy leaned forward in his seat. He had been watching the human carefully throughout the race. His people had concerns about allowing humans into the Galactic Athletic Federation. Humans were so new to the galactic community. They were so emotional, so unpredictable. The humans' display on the track confirmed every concern. It was primitive. It was excessive. It was completely inappropriate for an athlete of the Federation. And yet, touched his chest where his 2 hearts beat in an unusual pattern. He had watched thousands of races in his long life. He had seen the greatest athletes of 100 species compete. He had never felt what he felt right now watching the human kneel on the track with tears running down her face. What was this feeling? His translator had no word for it, but if he had to describe it, he would say it felt like waking up after a very long sleep. Made her way to the locker room, still confused by the reaction, or rather the lack of reaction. On Earth, when you won a race like that, people cheered. They shouted your name. Other athletes congratulated you or at least nodded in respect. Here, everyone just stared. She had barely sat down when aliens started coming in. First came its insect-like body covered in blue and green carapace. It clicked its mouth parts together nervously. "Human," it said. "May I ask you a question?" "Sure," said, unlacing her shoes. "What you did on the track, the sound, the movements, was it a ritual?" "A ritual?" Thought about it. "I guess you could call it that. We call it celebrating." "Celebrating," the repeated slowly. "And you do this every time you win?" Pretty much. Sometimes even when we lose if it was a good race. More aliens crowded into the doorway. Its large wings folded tight against its back. 3. Their crystalline bodies refracting the light into rainbows. Even its tentacles waving with curiosity. They all wanted to know about the celebration. Pulled out her data pad and showed them videos from Earth. Olympic celebrations, World Cup victories, championship games. The aliens watched in fascination as humans jumped up and down, hugged each other, cried tears of joy, pumped their fists, and sometimes even did backflips. But this seemed so, started then stopped. It flexed its wings, searching for words, so uncontrolled. That's kind of the point, said. When you feel that happy, you don't want to control it, you want to let it out. Let it out, repeated. The head joined the group. We do not let things out. We learned long ago that raw emotion leads to violence and chaos. We evolved past it. Looked at all the aliens crowded around her. They came from species that could travel between stars, that had cured every disease, that had built wonders humans couldn't even imagine yet. And they were all staring at her data pad like children seeing something magical for the first time. Can I ask you something? She said. When you win a race like today, how do you feel? Satisfied, said immediately. I feel satisfied that my training was successful. But do you feel happy? Was quiet for a long moment. I think I used to, it finally said. When I was very young, before my training taught me to release the satisfaction scent instead. That sounds lonely, said softly. The ears went flat against its head, worried she had offended it, but then said, yes, it does. Over the next few days, found herself giving informal lessons. Between her races and training sessions, aliens would ask her to explain human celebrations. She taught them that different cultures on Earth celebrated in different ways, but they all had one thing in common. They expressed the emotion physically and loudly. She showed the how to pump their fists. At first, their movements were stiff and awkward, but one young, after winning a heat race, forgot itself and thrust both wings upward with such force that it lifted off the ground for a second. The other gasped. Then, hesitantly, they made approving sounds. There were naturals at celebration. Once explained the concept, they started creating elaborate tentacle dances. Each tentacle moved in a different pattern, creating waves of motion that other could see and understand. Within days, every athlete had developed their own unique victory dance. They were more difficult. Their crystalline bodies didn't move the same way as flesh and bone. But notice that when they experienced strong emotions, they changed color slightly. She encouraged them to stop suppressing this response. The first time allowed itself to flash brilliant gold after a victory, the light was so beautiful that even the usually stoic judges stopped to watch. But not everyone was happy about these changes. Elder called an emergency council meeting. He was old enough to remember when his species first joined the Federation. He had spent his entire life upholding its traditions. This human influence is corrupting our athletes, he declared to the council. They are behaving like primitives. We must ban these displays immediately. Ambassador was also at the meeting. He had spent the past week watching the games carefully. He had also spent time reviewing historical records from his own people's past. Elder, he said carefully, before we evolved our current methods of emotional control, how did our ancestors celebrate victories? His wings rustled with irritation. That was thousands of years ago. We have advanced beyond such things. I found some old records, continued. Very old, from before we had translator technology. And do you know what I discovered? Our ancestors used to make sounds. They used to move their wings in patterns. They used to express emotion openly. We called it wind singing. The council chamber was silent. We did not evolve past joy, said quietly. We suppressed it, and perhaps it is time to ask ourselves why. Elder stood to argue, but another council member interrupted. The viewership numbers have been released, she said. Across the galaxy, beings are watching the games in record numbers. The broadcasts of human-style celebrations have been played billions of times. Beings are talking about the games who never cared before. Because it is a spectacle, said dismissively, a circus. No, said, because it reminds them of something they have forgotten, something we have all forgotten. The council voted. The celebrations would be allowed to continue. Elder left the chamber in disgust, convinced that the Federation had made a terrible mistake. But out on the track, something beautiful was happening. Athletes from different species were learning from each other. They taught the humans about scent marking. The humans taught the about high fives. They developed a group wing flutter that they performed together after team events. Even the normally solitary started gathering in groups after races, their colors flashing in synchronized patterns. Watched it all with amazement. She had come to the Galactic Games just hopping to compete well. She had never imagined she would start a revolution. But as she watched a young athlete throw its arms up and howl with joy after winning its first race, she felt something deep in her chest. Pride, maybe, or hope. The championship race was coming. Humanity versus the defending champions. Knew it would be the biggest test yet, not just of her speed, but of everything that had changed in the past few weeks. The whole galaxy would be watching. She couldn't wait. Part 2. The morning of the relay championship, woke up to find her data pad full of messages. Some were encouraging notes from other human athletes. Some were good luck wishes from alien competitors she had trained with. But one message stood out. It was from Elder. Human, the message read. You have disrupted traditions that kept order in the Federation for. I hope you understand the weight of what you have done. Today's race will show whether your influence has been helpful or harmful. The galaxy is watching. Set down the data pad and took a deep breath. She had not asked to become the face of this movement. She had just wanted to run, to compete, to do what she loved. But Elder was right about one thing. The whole galaxy was watching now. Her teammate knocked on her door. You ready for this? He asked. He was running the second leg of the relay. Sarah would run first, then, and finally would anchor. They were racing against the best relay teams from 12 species. But everyone knew the real competition was against the team had won the relay championship 15 times in a row. Ready as I'll ever be, said. She stood and stretched. Her legs felt good, strong. You. Nervous, admitted, but the good kind of nervous, the kind that makes you run faster. They made their way to the stadium together. The crowd was different today. In the past week, something had changed in how aliens watched the games. The stands were not silent anymore. Beings cheered and called out. They wore colors representing their favorite teams. Some of them had even painted their bodies or shells or crystalline surfaces with team symbols. In the warm-up area found, that was stretching its 4 powerful legs, preparing for the anchor leg it would run against. Hello, human, said. Its tone was friendly now, so different from that first confused conversation on the track. Hey, said, you ready? I am, are you? I think so. Hesitated, then asked, are you going to celebrate after the race, I mean, whoever wins? His ears flicked forward. Among this meant amusement. Oh yes, it said. I have been practicing my howl. My coach says it is very impressive now. Your coach is okay with it. My coach has started howling too, said. After practice, when no one is watching, I think it makes him feel young again. The call came for athletes to take their positions. Bumped fists with her teammates and made her way to the final exchange zone where she would wait for to bring the baton. Went to the exchange zone nearby. Their eyes met across the track, dipped its head in the traditional gesture of respect. Then, breaking tradition, it raised one paw and gave what could only be described as a thumbs up, laughed and returned the gesture. The starting horn blared. Sarah exploded from the blocks, her dark skin gleaming with sweat in the stadium lights. The first runner moved alongside her, its 4 legs eating up the track. A runner took an early lead, its powerful wings giving it bursts of speed. But this was a long race. 4 legs of 400 meters each. Anything could happen. The crowd roared, not the polite acknowledgement sounds of old Federation traditions, but real roaring. Beings shouted in 100 different languages. Tentacles waved. Wings flapped. Crystalline bodies flashed with color. The noise was incredible. Sarah came around the final turn of her leg in 3rd place. She pushed hard, her legs pumping, and tagged with the baton in 2nd place, just behind took off like a missile. He was the fastest human sprinter on the team, and his leg was all about raw speed. Watched him fly around the track. He caught the runner. He passed it. For a moment held the lead. Then a runner, its 6 legs moving in perfect rhythm, began to close the gap. The crowd's noise increased. Could barely hear herself think. Held strong. He came into the exchange zone still in 1st place and slapped the baton into his hand. Was their distance specialist, known for his endurance. He would need every bit of it because the 3rd leg runner was legendary for its finishing kick. For 300 meters and the ran shoulder to shoulder. Neither gave an inch. The stayed close behind. A runner, its crystalline form refracting the stadium lights into rainbow patterns, moved up on the outside. This was what the relay was supposed to be, pure competition, every team giving everything they had. Then, with 75 meters to go in the 3rd leg, made its move. It found another gear that simply did not have. It pulled ahead by 3 meters, then 5, then 7. Gritted his teeth and pushed harder, but was too strong. It tagged with a clear lead. Took the baton from and launched herself down the track. Ahead of her, ran with the smooth, powerful grace of a champion. The gap between them was too large. Knew this. But she ran anyway, pushing her body to its absolute limit. The crowd's noise was like a physical thing now, a wave of sound that pushed at her back. She could hear different species shouting. She could hear what sounded like winged thunder. She could hear the harmonic tones that made when they were excited. The whole galaxy was watching, Elder had said. Let them watch. Started to close the gap. Not much, just centimeters at a time, but she was closing it. Noticed and responded, pushing harder. They came around the final turn. The finish line lay ahead, 200 meters away. The gap was 5 meters, still too much. Lungs burned. Her legs felt like they were made of lead. Every stride took an enormous effort. But she thought about all the athletes who had learned to celebrate in the past week. The young who had howled for the first time. The who had discovered wind singing. The who had finally allowed their colors to shine freely. They had all learned to express their joy because one human had refused to hold it in. She found something extra, some reserve she did not know she had. She was closing the gap, 4 meters, 3.5, 3. The crowd was screaming. Even the normally stoic in the stands were flashing brilliant colors. Ambassador stood in the diplomatic box with both his hearts pounding. Elder stood nearby, his wings rigid with tension despite himself. 2.5 meters, 2. Was giving everything too, could see the strain in this body. This was what competition was supposed to be. 2 athletes pushing each other to impossible heights. The gap stabilized at 2 meters, then 1.5. 100 meters to go, 50, 25. Pulled even with hindquarters, then its midsection. She could hear this breathing, harsh and labored. Her own breath came in ragged gasps. 10 meters. She was almost level with his front legs. 5 meters. Threw herself forward, leaning into the finish line with every last bit of energy she possessed. She crossed the line, half a stride ahead of. For a moment could not process what had happened. Her body kept moving forward because it did not know how to stop yet. Then her legs gave out completely and she collapsed to the track. But this time she did not collapse alone. Her teammates crashed into her from behind, all of them laughing and crying and shouting at once. They formed a pile of humanity in the middle of the track, a tangle of arms and legs in pure, unfiltered joy. And then heard something that made her lift her head. was howling. The sat on the track just past the finish line, head thrown back, releasing a sound that started low and rose to a piercing note that echoed across the entire stadium. It was not a howl of defeat. It was a howl of joy. Joy at the race. Joy at pushing to the absolute limit. Joy at having been part of something incredible. The other three on their team stopped their traditional acknowledgement gestures mid-motion. They looked at each other. Then, one by one, they joined howl. Their voices blended together in harmonics that made the air vibrate. The team that had finished third suddenly spread their wings and began the wind singing that their ancestors had done thousands of years ago. The team clicked their carapaces in rhythmic patterns. The flashed through every color in the spectrum. Within seconds, athletes from every team on the track were celebrating together. Not just the winners, but everyone who had competed. Pulled herself up and went too. The howl faded as she approached. "That was amazing," said, breathing hard. "The howl, I mean, and the race." "You won," said. "You beat me." "Yeah, but that was the best race I've ever run. You pushed me to find something I didn't know I had." Was quiet for a moment, then it said something that would never forget. "I have won this race 15 times. I have released the satisfaction scent 15 times. I have performed the acknowledgement gesture 15 times, but I have never felt what I feel right now. This is better than winning. This is. What is your word? This is joy." Other athletes were gathering around them now. Humans and. Some had won their events. Some had lost. But all of them were celebrating together. The taught the humans the wind singing. The taught the harmonic howl. The created a canopy of light over everyone while the wove their tentacles together in patterns that meant shared victory in their culture. In the diplomatic box, Elder stood frozen. He had been prepared to prove that human celebrations were a destructive influence. He had been ready to present evidence to ban them permanently. But as he watched the track, he could not deny what he was seeing. The athletes were not fighting. They were not showing each other disrespect. They were sharing something that seemed to transcend species and culture and tradition. Ambassador approached him carefully. "Elder," he said, "I have been researching our histories, all of our histories, every species represented here today." "What did you find?" asked, not taking his eyes off the celebration below. "Every single one of us used to celebrate like this. The had wind singing, the had howling, the had carapace dancing. We all had ways to express joy. And somewhere along the way, as we became more advanced, we decided these things were primitive. We suppressed them. We called it evolution, but Elder, I do not think it was evolution at all." "What do you think it was?" "Fear," said simply. "Fear that if we allowed ourselves to feel things fully, we might lose control. But look at them." He gestured at the track. "Do they look out of control, or do they look like beings who have remembered how to be complete?" Elder watched a young athlete spreading its wings and singing, its voice rough and untrained but full of pure emotion. He remembered, suddenly, being young himself. Remembered the wind songs his grandmother had sung when she thought no one was listening. Remembered asking her about them and being told that such things were from the old days, before they had learned to be civilized. "We did not evolve past joy," said slowly, repeating words from the council meeting. "We suppressed it." "Yes. Why?" "I do not know, but I think perhaps we should stop." On the track, found herself at the center of a celebration that involved at least 50 athletes from 12 different species. They were teaching each other their celebrations, mixing them together in ways that created something entirely new. A showed her how to add a howl to her victory scream. A taught her team the basic pattern of wind singing. The kept everyone lit up in brilliant, joyful colors. This was what it was supposed to be about, thought. Not just winning, not just being the best, but pushing yourself and your competitors to achieve something incredible together, and then celebrating that achievement as a shared victory of effort and skill and determination. The championship ceremony was unlike any the Federation had ever seen. Yes, medals were awarded. Yes, the human team stood on the highest platform while their anthem played. But when the anthem ended, instead of stepping down in dignified silence, they started celebrating again. And this time the other teams joined them. The stadium shook with the noise. Later, as made her way back to the locker room, she passed Elder in the corridor. The old was standing alone, his wings held in a posture she could not read. She almost walked past him without stopping, but something made her pause. "Elder," she said respectfully, "did you want to speak with me?" The looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Human, you have changed the Federation." "I'm sorry," if started, but raised a wing to stop her. "I was going to say that you have damaged our traditions, that you have made us all less civilized, but I realize now that I was wrong." He paused, his wings trembling slightly. "You have not changed us. You have reminded us who we used to be, before we forgot, and I think I would like to remember." Smiled, "It's not too late. I am very old. Joy doesn't have an age limit." Elder's wings moved in a way that might have been a laugh. "Perhaps you are right." He hesitated, then asked, "This wind singing that the young are doing, could you show me how to start?" So, exhausted and sore and still covered in the dust of the track, taught one of the most powerful beings in the Federation how to sing with joy. It took a while. His voice was rusty from decades of suppressing it, but eventually a sound emerged. It was shaky and uncertain at first, but it was there. A wind song, an expression of pure emotion that his species had been creating for millions of years before they had decided it was too primitive for civilized beings. When finished, his eyes were wet, had not known could cry. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I had forgotten what this felt like." "What does it feel like?" asked. Spread his wings wide, a gesture of openness that was almost never seen in public. "It feels like being alive," he said. Part 3. News of the Relay Championship spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed travel. The videos of the celebration were played billions of times in the first day alone. Beings from thousands of worlds watched as athletes from a dozen species expressed joy together, mixing their different traditions into something new and beautiful. The response was not what anyone expected. Reports started coming in from worlds across the Federation. Young children were howling in playgrounds, and their parents were joining in instead of stopping them. Wind-singing groups were forming in every city, with beings of all ages learning the old songs their ancestors had sung. The carapace dances, which had been relegated to historical museums, were suddenly being performed in public squares. Even perhaps the most reserved species in the galaxy, were allowing themselves to flash colors freely for the first time in recorded history. Watched the reports from her quarters on the Federation station, exhausted but unable to sleep. Her data pad kept pinging with new messages. Interview requests from every major news network. Scientists wanting to study the psychological effects of emotional expression. Historians wanting to document what they were calling the Great Remembering. But the message that caught her attention was from someone unexpected. Dr. Haz, head of the Institute of Cultural Evolution, wanted to speak with her urgently. Almost deleted it, assuming it was another interview request, but something about the tone made her accept the call. Doctor Haz appeared on her screen. She was old even for her wings faded and thin, but her eyes were sharp and bright. "Human," she said, "thank you for taking my call. I am sure you are very busy." "It's okay," said. "What can I do for you?" "I need to show you something. It is important. Can you come to the Institute archives tomorrow?" Agreed, curious despite her exhaustion. The next morning, she made her way to the Institute, a massive building near the center of the Federation station. Doctor has met her at the entrance and led her deep into the archives, past rows and rows of data crystals containing thousands of years of history. "I have been a historian for 300 years, Doctor has said as they walked. "I have dedicated my life to studying how our species evolved, and until yesterday, I believed our current form was superior to our past, that we had improved ourselves by suppressing emotional expression, that this was the natural progression of intelligence. They stopped in front of a display containing very old artifacts, could see primitive musical instruments, decorative objects, and what looked like ceremonial clothing. These are from before the Great Refinement, Doctor has explained. The period when our people decided that emotional expression was holding us back. We had just achieved interstellar travel. We had just discovered that we were not alone in the universe, and we were terrified. Terrified of what? Of being seen as primitive by the other species we met. Doctor has touched one of the musical instruments gently. So we suppressed everything that made us seem emotional. We stopped wind singing. We stopped dancing. We stopped crying and laughing in public. We convinced ourselves it was evolution, but it was really just fear. Fear of not being taken seriously. She turned to look at. And do you know what happened? Every other species did the same thing. The suppressed their howling. The stopped their dances. The learned to dim their colors. We all looked at each other and decided that to be truly advanced, we needed to stop feeling so much, or at least stop showing it. Stared at the artifacts. They were beautiful. Why had they been locked away in an archive? But feeling things is part of being alive. How can you just stop? You cannot really. You just push it down. You pretend it is not there. And generation after generation, you forget that you are pretending. Doctor has his wings drooped. Until a young human runs a race and reminds an entire galaxy what they have lost. I didn't mean to. I know. That is what makes it so powerful. You were just being yourself. You were just expressing joy in the way that felt natural to you. And because you did that, billions of beings across the galaxy are remembering how to be themselves too. Doctor has led to another section of the archive. Here, there were video recordings, very old ones from before the Great Refinement, watched as ancients sang together, their voices blending in harmonies that made her skin prickle. She watched howl at their moons. She watched dance in elaborate patterns that told stories with their whole bodies. This is who we were, Doctor has said softly. Before we decided it was not civilized enough. And now, thanks to you, we have a chance to be that again. Not to go backward, but to move forward without leaving these parts of ourselves behind. Felt tears building in her eyes. I just wanted to run races, she said. I just wanted to compete. I know, but sometimes the most important revolutions are started by people who are just trying to live honestly. Doctor has smiled. Now come, I have something else to show you. They went to a different part of the archives, one that required special clearance. Doctor has opened a sealed room and gestured for to enter. Inside were thousands of data crystals, all marked with warning labels. These are the records we suppressed, Doctor has explained. Personal journals, songs, poems, art, anything that expressed too much emotion. We did not destroy them, but we locked them away. We told ourselves it was to preserve history, but really it was because we were ashamed of them. That's horrible, whispered. Yes, it is. But now we can release them. Now we can let beings see what their ancestors created when they allowed themselves to feel freely. Doctor has touched one of the crystals reverently. The Council has authorized me to begin releasing these records to the public, to let everyone remember, and I wanted to thank you for making that possible. Over the next weeks, the remembering, as it was being called, spread further. It started with athletics, but it did not stay there. Artists across the galaxy began creating works that expressed emotion openly. Musicians revived old songs and created new ones. Writers told stories that made people feel instead of just think. But there was resistance too. Not everyone was happy about the changes. Some beings felt that emotional expression was dangerous, that it would lead to chaos and violence. They formed groups to protest the new celebrations, to demand a return to the old, controlled ways. Found herself in the middle of this debate whether she wanted to be or not. She was invited to speak at the Federation Council, to explain what human celebrations meant and why they mattered. She did not feel qualified to speak for all of humanity, let alone for all the species that were now learning to express emotion openly. But Ambassador convinced her to come. "You do not need to be an expert," he told her. "You just need to tell the truth about how you feel." So stood before the council, looking up at representatives from hundreds of worlds, and told the truth. "I'm just a runner," she said. "I'm not a philosopher or a historian or a psychologist, but I know what it feels like to push your body to the absolute limit and achieve something you thought was impossible. And I know that when that happens, I need to express what I'm feeling. Not because it's tactical or traditional or civilized, but because holding it in feels like lying, like pretending a huge part of the experience didn't happen." She paused, gathering her thoughts.